Everybody, this is Ismortah, and on this evening's stream I'll be showing you my complete board game collection. Where do I store all my stuff? What sorts of games do I have? And what's at my arsenal and where do I put it? So before I get started, just let me have a moment to check the feed, and then we'll get started. Let me prop you up so you can look at some games while I check this right quick. 1 second. Be nice if my computer came on. Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right, looks like I heard a little bit of sound, so I think it's good. Alrighty. So like I said, I'm going to show you my board game collection. What all have I amassed? Why? And where is it? So, I'll start off with my war area. I call it that because this is where the game design magic happens. This is currently Elementers you see on the table here. The alpha build, and I'm currently in beta phase, making tweaks to game mechanics and starting to flesh out the remaining UI elements that I need to add to the game. And so that's what's going on the table here, but that's not the purpose of this video. On the wall back here is one of the primary places where I have half of my game collection. Let's see, before I get started, as far as board games, I've been playing all my life, but there's been like two different phases. Like one that was back in the day when I was playing games, which like family game night on Fridays or something, or if there was a babysitter when I was really young. And then, honestly, did not really play board games at all until about, I want to say 5 years ago, that I got back into the hobby, which is about the same time that the hobby really started to explode. To get back into this, I call it renaissance of board games, that people are playing because of the hobby, what you can do with a board game, as opposed to just, oh, let's play a game with family members around the table if there's nothing else better to do, sort of thing. So it just really evolved as far as like a social activity and what you can introduce to the game hobby, with miniatures, different styles of gameplay, and immersion, and different types of storytelling. So yeah, so what you'll see in my collection is a combination of those two phases. So I have back here is a bunch of the games that are some of my favorites and that I typically pull out, so that's why I kept them out here. As well as these are the games that are typically heavier. Not necessarily how long they play, but just the weight of the game, which is why I have it on this type of stand, because it can hold a lot of weight of objects. So let's start at the bottom. So at the bottom here, I have some of the really classic old board games that I had during that first phase of my life, when I would just play occasionally with family members at home. So I have Monopoly, which everyone has, which I'm not going to talk about because even though it is a historical game, it is actually, a pretty terrible game. Barring the whole building up your, property is of interest, but the whole roll to move and you can lose 2 hours in, but have to sit there 5 hours, not fun. Risk, which I believe was the first area control game I ever played. Still a fun game, but it's just a game that I wish there was more strategy and a little bit less luck. The fact that you can have a game that you play for, you have an army of 20 versus army of 5, and just by sheer luck, you can lose your entire army against that army of 5, which is, a little too luck heavy. Dexter, which is based on the movie, and it's actually really cool immersion as far as the movie, even the fact that how you collect items, you actually store them in a dumpster bag, which is where Dexter would put his bodies. So it was really thematic. It had some game stuff that wasn't entirely balanced, but very thematic. And then Trivial Pursuit. I believe this is the only one of a couple party games that I own. But this one was pretty cool just because it's actually trivia that I actually knew, which was Star Wars. And this is actually based on the classic trilogy, well before episodes 1 through 3 or anything else came out. Then next up, I have the heaviest, both in time and weight games that I own. At the top here, I have Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition. I was really late on the bandwagon or getting involved in Twilight Imperium at all, especially 3rd Edition. I probably had this game for like a year or two before 4th Edition came out. And so that's why I was excited about buying 4th Edition, because I spent hundreds of dollars on this current edition. As you see, I have Twilight Imperium with all the expansions. The game is a lot of fun. It's just, there were a couple house rules that I typically play with to make the game more balanced, a little more immersive, and a little bit shorter than the typical Twilight Imperium game. But it is a lot of fun. So I believe Twilight Imperium 4 is an improvement in practically every way as far as gameplay. It just, like I said, I spent so much money on this Twilight Imperium version, and the fact that I actually still like a couple of the ships from the 3rd edition better than 4th edition, so there's like not a lot of incentive to get the next one right now, just because I get this house rule to make this enjoyable experience. Underneath it is one of my 2 favorite games right now. This is Kingdom Death Monster. I showed you guys some miniatures from that game a few weeks ago. And this is a game that actually only, realistically, it has 2 phases to the game. And each phase you could do in just a couple hours. But it's also a campaign. So you play through a session, but then there's probably like 30 sessions to beat the game, quote unquote, if you get that far. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I am expecting some more stuff this year, expansion-wise, for the game as well. Then up here, I have some more favorites. I'll start with the left. On the left, I have the Kickstarter version of the, what would you call it? I don't want to say 2nd edition, but the redesign of Fireball Island. I'll talk about here. Here I have the classic, and this is the new one that was kickstarted, I believe, last year. And I got, at the time, every expansion for the game, just because it looked like a lot of fun. This version being more dexterity based than the previous version, and has a lot of different game modes you can add to the game, but nothing's required. And it just, you're knocking over fireballs, and you're trying to collect loots for points, and getting back to the helicopter to score those points by the end of the game. On the right here, I have half of my Star Wars collection, game-wise. I have Rebellion and Armada. Rebellion at the top, I would say right now, is probably my favorite board game that I've played thus far, only because it's a 4X game, similar to Twilight Imperium, but it's what I call my Twilight Imperium Light. And it's just cool because you're doing all these different types of things in this board game. So it's hitting a lot of different cylinders, and it's with that Star Wars theme. I don't know if any of you guys had played Star Wars Rebellion on the computer like 20 years ago, but that's what this board game is actually based on. That style of play. The fact that you're trying to build up your bases and your fleet across the galaxy, while at the same time you're trying to find the rebel base or evade the Empire as the rebels. So it's really a combination of that style of play and that brand with Twilight Imperium is really what it feels like. And then below it, I have Armada, which is probably the newest Star Wars game that I get into. That is, you're moving around capital ships, and it's more strategery on how to have those different capital ships and squadrons engage with the enemy. And it's a tactical game, so you're moving around the actual capital ships and the squadrons to attack the enemy. It's a lot of fun. A miniatures game. Then on this level, we got some more games. I'll start on the right this time. This is one of the first games that I actually played. I can't remember if I played Betrayal House on the Hill or um, Lords of Waterdeep first, but Lords of Waterdeep was definitely one of the games that got me into the hobby because it was so easy to learn. It's just a resource management game, and it's really a solitary game that you play with other people. Yeah, there's cards that you could influence other players, or the fact that you take resources from a spot that someone else wanted. But really, it's a solitary game that you're just playing with other players, and then you at the end you see who got the most gold or victory points, I should say. So in the middle, I have Lords of Waterdeep, and then above it, I have the expansion, also which is Scoundrels of Skullport. Um, this what's cool about this expansion is actually two expansions in one. It's the Skullport as well as what's the other one called? But it's like one was the location of Skullport, and the other one is like the um you introduced fuck what it was called. Um, but the God, I forget off the top of my head. Let me see. Maybe it's on the back. Um, Skullport and oh yeah, and the corruption and that in the introduction of corruption tokens. So there were places and actions you could do in the game that you got corruption for doing it, but you got tons more value than a regular action or location. But then at the end of the game, you got penalized for how much corruption was in the game. That was actually negative points. So you could play with that mode or an additional Skullport, which added just more intricate and higher value places you can go. Below it, this is a relatively new game that I got, and this is definitely the first out of the Axis and Allies series. This is Axis and Allies and Zombies. This is actually one of the games that I learned about just by watching YouTube, Game to Game. And I saw him playing this game. I was like, holy shit, this looks like a lot of fun. Basically, it's like playing, if you played Saturn back in the day, Iron Storm or any other area control military game. But then it also introduced this zombie element to it as well. So it's like you're trying to fend off or defeat the allies, so at the same time deal with the zombie problem. And it is a miniatures game, and it's a lot of fun because like it's like World War II with a zombie twist. And on the left here, let me reposition. Got some more of my favorite games. I'll start at the bottom. This one is Cry Havoc. This is another area control game that actually, unlike Axis and Allies, and probably more like Rebellion, it's asymmetric different players. So each player has a different faction or race that has completely different powers and completely different way to try to win the game via victory points. Which with one of the main ways to get victory points is by collecting these crystals. They actually look like these guys here in the bag, the little ones, the shiny ones anyway. And on this alien planet. So it's a lot of fun. And it plays three, I want to say two to four players, right? And depending on how many players play, you either have a NPC neutral faction or all the factions being played with, of which there are four. In the middle here, it's one of my favorite area control games, Blood Rage. This is interesting because it actually combines area control with resource management. It's really two really completely different types of games, really done well as one single game all on its own, all in a package. And this has a Viking theme. So you're having these Vikings and trying to earn the most glory, of which there are different ways you can do it, either by killing people or by having people go to Valhalla or by actually controlling locations. A lot of different paths to victory. And at the top here is probably my newest board game I want to say that I got. Fury Dracula. This is, I want to say, fourth edition? Fourth edition. Basically, the box looks exactly like third edition. It just has a couple newer graphic and art updates from WizKids. But this is really cool. It's a game, again, similar to Rebellion, that you're trying, it's kind of like a cat and mouse game, that you're trying to find Dracula and kill him, while Dracula is trying to evade you and corrupt the world. and you have this band of four, and you're just trying to um, travel across Europe trying to find Dracula. And it's actually a lot of fun. Definitely, I believe it, except for Kingdom Death Monster, my only two horror games that I own, and one of two cat and mouse games. Horror. I don't know, I couldn't say the word earlier. And then up here, we have probably my two favorite, let me move around, board games as a child. And probably some of my oldest too, just like Monopoly and Risk. These two were made in the late 80s. And both by Mullen Bradley. You can tell because the colors that he used to wow people are almost done exactly the same way with the blues and the reds. Start with the one on top, since we talked about that kind of previously. It's Fireball Island. This game is a dexterity game, the fact that you're flicking fireballs to kill people, but it plays a little different from the newer version. The newer version is more, you're trying to get the most points, and fireballs are less punishing, whereas fireballs in this game are more punishing, and it's more card-based. The fact that your cards have more meaning for stopping the opponent, and you're trying to stop someone with the jewel from getting on the boat, as opposed to getting the most victory points in the other game when you get on the chopper. But it's a lot of fun. And both games, and I don't know if I've said this before, have a 3D map. As you can see in this picture here, that's actually the only 3D map that I have. So you're playing in a 3D space, which is pretty cool. Especially when we see fireballs start rolling down the mountain. And the bottom here, I have the Omega Virus. This is probably my favorite board game as a child. Because, one, it's the only electronic board game that I own. But it was just cool because you were playing against other players that you're trying to stop this virus from infecting the station and getting control of the weapon system, which can destroy the planet. But at the same time, you're trying to be the one that gets the glory for doing so. So it's like you want to stop him in time, but you want to be the one to do it. And it plays with a timer. And you're talking to the game, and the game's talking back to you and mocking you and giving you information. And so it's a lot of kind of like all the commands you're doing, everything is electronic. So it's a lot of fun. It's definitely like before its time. Very innovative electronic board game. Alrighty. And then my next batch of games is in my pantry here, which I call my board game closet, because that's what it has been turned into. So I'll just briefly go over this. It's because my favorite games really were what I've already showed you. So at the top here, I have storage for smaller board games. The bottom here, I have a heavy version of a chess set that I own that's based on Gotham City, which maybe I'll show you in a future stream. Get it out. It's just really heavy and really delicate. Whereas up here, I have a chess set that's based on knights and dragons and that sort of thing, which is also pretty cool. Again, this may be another fun video showing you my two different chess sets. And then in the back here, I have storage for all of my Armada in plastic containers, the ships. And then here I have all of the game pieces and cardboard for X-Wing 1.0. Whereas in the sack here, I have all my pieces for X-Wing 2.0. I'm sorry, here I got 2.0 and 1.0. And then the sacks 1.0 and 2.0 stuff that couldn't fit in these. What these are really good for is holding cards and small bits and cardboard pieces, but not the huge rulers and that sort of thing. Then back here in the two Feldherr cases, I have all of my X-Wing ships. In the three suitcases you see here, all the cases actually, and the Bolus binder, Hail Bolus, Nickel Bolus. And back here, these are all magic cards. So I have in these three, man, all my suitcases and this shit, these are all magic cards, even that I've been collecting ever since like 20 plus years ago. So I have a ton of magic cards. So that's this clause in a nutshell. Now I'll go into a little bit on the board games that I have here. At the top here, I have Star Wars Risk. No, Star Wars Battleship, which plays like typical Battleship. It just has a slapped on Star Wars theme. Below it, I have Star Wars Risk, which actually is not Risk at all. I'm not sure why they even called it Risk. Yes, it uses dice, but plays absolutely nothing like Risk. And I actually recommend it because it's a relatively quick game compared to other Star Wars games. That one takes a little over an hour to play, and it's only 2-player. And it's based on the campaign of Episode 6, but with different arcs. So you have to decide as you get these cards whether you want to do actions on Hoth, or actions on Endor, or actions trying to defend or destroy the Death Star. And it's in that sense, it's kind of like Memoir 44. You're using cards to choose what your actions you're going to do, and you have to choose what theater of war you're going to give action on that turn. It's actually a lot of fun. I do recommend. Below, and then here I have a Star Wars Death Star from Empire at War video game that came out eons ago, but it's a fun piece to use for Star Wars Risk because you can put it in the center where the Death Star is, and when you press the button, it makes this whole Death Star shooting and destroying Alderaan sound effect. So really adds to the immersion. Below here I have Takenoko, which is one of my favorite lighter games. That's all based on you're either trying to grow bamboo or have the panda eat the bamboo. It's all about just tending this garden based on points. And again, it's like Fireball Island, it's a 3D game. The fact you're actually growing these tall stalks of bamboo, which is pretty cool. Next to it, I have a couple smaller games. For this, I may have to go into it. So at the top, I have Coup. I keep wanting to say Coop. This is, I believe, is my only bluffing game, and I believe one of the 2 party games I have. I call it a party game all because it's like really short to play. You can play with any number of players, kind of like Trivial Pursuit. And this game is all based on line, so if you're a good liar, you'll have a great time. And it has really great art too. It's just a card game. Below it, I have Purge. This is a game that I got at one of the conventions, and I haven't played it yet, but this looks really cool because it uses, like what you see here, real-time strategy. Meaning, you're playing the game, and it's not turn-based. It's you do stuff, now I'm going to do something else, now I'm going to do something else. And if you do your actions slower than the opponent, well, that's real time. So you have to, not spend too long during your actions because someone else might be doing actions faster than you. Pretty cool idea. I just haven't gotten around to trying it yet. Underneath it, I have... Actually, I take that back. I think this is a 3rd game that would count. I don't know. Well, no, it's not part of the game. It's in the other players. I'll say it's a short game. A filler game. Guillotine, which is all based on you're trying to cut people's heads off, as you see here, and whoever has the most points doing so wins. But it uses all these different famous characters from that time period that actually were beheaded, which is pretty interesting and funny. Similar with this, which is Nostalgia, Boss Monster. Has nostalgia, so it looks like a typical Nintendo NES game, as well as also have the expansion, which looks like a Game Boy, that has some additional rules, but it has, those 8-bit graphics, and you're instead of playing the role of a hero in the video game, you play the role of the boss monster in one of those dungeons, trying to kill heroes that are going into your precious dungeon. And it's you just building this dungeon as most effectively as possible to get points for killing heroes before they kill you. Below here, I have Small World Underground, which is my favorite version I've seen of Small World. What's cool about Small World Underground is its own standalone game. So it has its own base and core components that you don't even need the original version of Small World. Whereas below it is a typical expansion. They call it a power pack that adds more races and powers to the game. This one adds some royal and mystical creatures to the game. In this box here, I have Bears vs. Babies, which was a game made by The Onion. Let me see if I can show it right quick. Which looks like, the case looks like a bear. And it's all about trying to make monstrous bears and horrific creatures to kill horrifically ugly babies. And whoever, that's now why I close this, whoever kills the most baby armies wins. It's as stupid as it sounds. And as fun as it sounds, too. On the top here, I'm just storing some boxes and unused components for expansions of games. Here I have, the 1.0 core box, the 2.0 X-Wing core box, the Rebellion expansion. So I have the expansion for Rebellion as well, which is a lot of fun. It's another variant. So basically a different type of scenario you can play as. The fact that you can play as trying to build the Death Star as in Rebellion, or I'm sorry, you already have the Death Star out in Rebellion and you're trying to destroy it, versus you're trying to build it in this one, which is based on the Rogue One theme. As well as it introduces an upgrade to the combat system. I like the system that it introduces in Rise of Rebellion a little bit better. A little more balanced, a little more thematic, even though the one that they had in Rebellion was also worked. Next here, on the right here was a game. Actually, I misspoke. This is actually the newest game I just got. Actually, last weekend from my father, which was Titan. This is an ancient game. It was like early 80s and made by Avalon Hill, the same people who made this Avalon Hill game, Betrayal House on the Hill. And I had no idea that game company was actually around for that long. And this is actually an area control game. And I may have to check this out later to show how it plays. Honestly, it looks kind of bad compared to board game standards nowadays, but the fact that there was an area control fantasy-based game way back in the day, I had no idea. Betrayal House on the Hill, you see here with expansion, is probably the game that got me into the industry. I mean, I can't remember if it's the first game I played, but it's the game that definitely wowed me as far as what you could do in the game. Like, mechanically, Lords of Waterdeep's what sucked me in, but as far as having an immersive experience in miniatures, it was definitely Betrayal House on the Hill. Because when I played this at DungeonCon probably like 5 years ago, this guy had miniatures for every monster in the core edition of Betrayal. And it's like, holy shit, it was so cool. And it's like, you're just trying to survive this horrific experience with other players, or betray and be a traitor and kill him. It's like, oh, it was so cool. Below here, I have Smash Up. I don't have any expansions, but this is a fun game you can play with. I want to say it's up to 4 to 6 players. I can't remember. It's probably, I believe if you have more cards, maybe it's more players. I actually forget. But it's just a card game. They are trying to make different decks of 2 different types of monsters, throw them together, and smash enemy cities and bases for points. The game on the right here is probably only one of 2 board games I have not played at all yet in my collection. One was Titan, only because I just got it. But this one I just haven't played it, only because I need to find a group that's actually willing to play it. This is my only learning board game, or instructional, whatever the correct verbiage is. And this is the collector's edition. And why I was really drawn to this game is it teaches you cell biology, which was my major in college. And the fact that this is a very accurate version of the different interactions and steps that need to take place for the cell to function. So you're controlling the actions of different organelles, doing different processes that involve using the energy in a cell, which is called ATP. So it's really cool, the fact that you're having fun playing game and actually learning something at the same time. And the fact that this is my major, it's like, holy shit, it's like 2 birds, 1 stone. Definitely game I need to check out here in the soon. And on the bottom here, I have Munchkin, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. This is the core game, but it's actually the deluxe version. Standard Munchkin, but it's played on a board just for the purpose of scoring points. The fact that you move your character on this board to show where you're at in the dungeon corresponds with if you're at level 8 or level 9, for example. And below it, Summoner Wars. It's another card game, fantasy-based, but it's also tactical. So depending on where you move your different cards that are warriors or spellcasters, they may have line of sight, they may not be close enough to do melee, And so it's a tactical game, just play with cards, which is pretty interesting. So that's all of my board games in a nutshell. Again, hail Nicol Bolas. Now I just want to show you just where I keep the rest of my miniatures for these board games. And then we'll close it out. So over here is where I have all of my miniatures, which I don't have stored in a case. In my case, I store my X-Wing ships and pieces that I still have to build for Kingdom Death Monster. I'm sorry, Armada ships. Armada ships. My X-Wing ships are in those cases. But here's where I have all my other miniatures. I think it's better without the light. So at the top here, I have all of the Kingdom Death Monster pieces I still have yet to assemble as I progress through the campaign or new monsters to encounter. Below it, I have some D&D books, 5th edition and classic 3rd edition. On the left here, I have some books that I reference for game design. On the right here, I have a book that I reference for creating UI graphic elements on the computer, Corel Draw, where all the gaming action happens. And here are my miniatures. So at the top here, and these are some miniatures I showed in previous streams. Here I have my Rebel miniatures for Armada. One sec. Second level, I have my Empire ships for Armada. See if it gets into focus. There you go. And then on the bottom, I have Kingdom Death Monster. Cool, so that's all I have to show you guys for this evening. I want to say I have a pretty sizable board game collection, but I know people have entire walls look like a library of games. But I'm at the point now that I'm just fighting for space. I'm throwing stuff in corners, different corners of my place, and the pantry. If I start acquiring more games, which I know I will, I'm going to have to find more space to put the stuff. Maybe I'll start building up my bedroom as well. Well, thanks for watching. This is the current games I'm getting into, and I'll let you know when I acquire new games, either from conventions, Amazon most likely, Cool Stuff Inc., or Kickstarter, what stuff I'm into and what stuff I tend to expect. So far this year, I'm expecting to get my Super Star Destroyer, as well as Wave 3 of Kingdom Death Monster 1.5 later this year. So look forward to that, and show you guys those miniatures when I get them as well. Well, thanks for watching. My next board game stream will be next Sunday, 7 p.m. PST, which will most likely be an Elementers update, but I'll keep you posted. And my next stream, though, is Monday, 7 p.m. PST, during my online card game stream. And for that, I'm going to be doing some more Hearthstone, trying to get as far as I can in the new Dalaran adventure. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Again, this is Ismortah. I'll catch you next time.